let's talk about bookbinding. Welcome back to Ewe Swe You. Come and join me down the bookbinding rabbit hole. I recently shared a video of my first attempt at a case-bound book, which I'll link up here, but I've also been dabbling into other styles of binding and exploring the bookbinding corner of the internet. So let's take an introductory look at this art form. So first of all, what is bookbinding? In its simplest form, it's joining papers together to create a book, which sounds pretty straightforward, right? However, bookbinding has a very long history and therefore a multitude of styles and traditions from all four corners of the world. From sewn bindings to glued ones, softback and hardback, decorative and functional. There's a bookbinding style for pretty much any book you can think of. A brief internet search will tell you that in the 2nd century BCE, Hindi scribes were etching religious texts into palm leaves, and they were binding them together with twine between two boards. So that's something that we would recognise as a book-type object. This leads to India being traditionally considered the birthplace of bookbinding. Romans also feature in the early history of books. Since the 1st century AD, they started using codex-style books, so a stack of pages bound at one edge alongside the text, using sheets of papyrus or vellum for the pages until the spread of Chinese papermaking via the Islamic world in the 8th century, I believe. From the 5th century, Western books were constructed of folded parchment sewn onto strong cords and bound in hard wooden boards covered in leather. Early books were bound with flat spines, so the rounded spines that are associated with the more luxurious hardcovers today weren't used until around the 15th century, whilst the cloth-covered case-bound book that we're possibly most familiar with today, that was developed in Britain during the first half of the 19th century. So you can see that the history of bookbinding is extensive. We haven't even touched on its development outside of the Western world. Asia and the Islamic world will have developed their own styles and techniques to suit their writing style and the direction that they write in. I would encourage you to look into how books developed in your region. It's a huge and fascinating topic. All of the information I've given so far today was on the first page of a Google search using the term history of bookbinding. So I mean, you can adapt that to history of bookbinding in your area, and that'll give you a bit more information as to how traditions and styles and techniques evolved where you are. So let's move on to thinking about the anatomy of a book. And there are many physical parts of a book. Each has their own name, their own function. We're going to keep it fairly simple and focus on the key parts of a case-bound book like the one I made in that previous video. So like I say, it will have been linked up top. I suspect most people are familiar with this style of book. Other styles may not include some of the parts that we're going to discuss here. I mean, some of them might have others. I don't know all the styles. The exterior of this type of book, so the hard bit, is called the case, hence case bound. The case is formed of a front and back cover and a spine. In this particular case-bound book, the boards that form the case are covered in decorative paper, while the spine is covered in book cloth. So that's a paper-backed woven fabric. The paper's there to stop the glue seeping through. The boards in this instance are made from a thick cardboard known as bookboard. It's sometimes referred to as grey board. I think chipboard is pretty much the same thing. It's not a term that's commonly used in the UK for cardboard, but I think it's the same thing. So it's a few millimetres thick. Inside the case, at the top and the bottom of the spine, if I just hold that nearer the lens, we can see the headband and at the other end the tailband. So the head is the top of the book, the tail is the bottom. In this instance, the headband and tailband were woven strips of like a ribbon type fabric, a cotton linen-y fabric that comes in sort of ribbon-like lengths. And that's glued in place, but older styles of book would have had these bands woven directly onto the main block of the book. There are people that still do that today, and there are books available with patterns and that kind of thing of how to do it. So these bands serve to provide extra strength and durability to the book. So if a book's placed on a shelf, as you grab it, it's the spine, the head and the tail of the spine, that's going to take more stress. So they're there to strengthen the book in those circumstances. Now, inside the book, at both the front and the back are the end papers. In this instance, they're plain, but decorative papers can be used. These papers connect the main block of the case-bound book to the case, to the front cover and the back cover. There are various ways to do this, but in this instance, they've been glued across the interior of the covers. Now we come to the heart of the book, the book block or text block. This is the compilation of pages that make up the book. So in this example, there are groups of folded paper that have been sewn together, and I've used woven tape and glue along the spine for added strength and stability. But this is only one method for connecting pages, more on that in a moment. Each bundle of folded papers is referred to as a signature or a section, kind of depending on where you are. The signature seems to be most common on the internet as far as I can tell so far. So let's take a closer look at a signature, as we can break that down further into its constituent parts, and yes, you've guessed it, they all have their own names too. So this is a signature. It's a folded bundle of paper waiting to be sewn into a book. Most of us will instinctively know that the side facing us is an individual page. The front and back of each bit, so page 1 and 2 together, make a leaf. 2 leaves, or 4 pages on the same piece of paper, make a folio. Incidentally, just to confuse matters, folio also refers to a size of book, but for our purposes, a folio is a sheet of paper folded in half. Hence, early copies of Shakespeare's plays were referred to as folios. They were printed on sheets of paper folded in half. A sheet of paper folded in half and then in half again, so into 4, would be a quarto should you ever need it. So now that we have a little bit of an understanding of what makes up a book, let's think about how to plan a book to bind ourselves. First up, we need to decide what sort of book we want to make. A lot of this will come down to function. Are we binding a book that needs to be read or used as a notebook? Do we want to create a sketchbook or a scrapbook? Or do we have a bunch of loose leaf papers that we want to bind together? Case-bound books are great for notebooks and reading books, but may not be the best choice for a sketchbook. They certainly won't work to bind together loose sheets of paper. Next, we need to think about how we want our book to look. Do we want to be able to see the stitching along the spine? Do we want to have a cloth or leather cover? Do we want a hardback or a softback book? Once we've made these choices, we can start to plan our binding, so let's look at some options. Now, we've spent quite a bit of time looking at the case-bound book, so let's put that to one side for now. This is a long stitch binding, so the stitches are visible along the exterior of the spine, and the cover in this case is made from a collage of papers, so it's flexible but not entirely soft. As a variation on this, we have the French link stitch. So this is a more decorative stitch, so it's exposed along the spine. You can use it in a case bound, but it's pretty, so why not show it off? And this book, I've used scrapbook paper and card to form a signature-like cover for the front and the back, and the pages are just printer paper, but the stitching is done in a waxed thread, and it looks kind of pretty. You get this cross effect going down the side. There are more options for these types of stitches, so how you sort of space them out along the spine, how you interact from one stitch to the next, that kind of thing. But the long stitch and the French link stitch are probably the more beginner friendly of the stitches that go vertically along the spine as you've got it on the shelf. So similar to the long stitch in a way, we have this ribbon bound book. Now the signatures themselves in this book have been sewn together with a long stitch, just the 2 holes there, so long stitch down the middle, and that's enclosed in a paperback cover. I mean, it's literally a wrapping paper that I've used for the cover here, but the cover itself has visible binding stitches to attach it to the text block. I don't know if this has a particular name. It was part of an online paper crafting workshop that I took during, the dark times of, everything shutting down. But it's kind of pretty. So I might do this sort of style of book again at some point. Quite a simple technique, and it looks nice. If you're planning a book that needs to lay flat, such as a sketchbook, then the style of binding is particularly important. So the French link stitch without a covering on the spine will work. It does lie nice and flat at pretty much any page you want to open it at, so that's a good option. Another good choice would be the Coptic stitch, which is this one. So it creates a flexible spine. So the pages open flat, works well with both hard and soft covers, and it creates decorative braids that kind of travel up the spine. If I can hold that closer to the camera for you, see if I can get that to focus a little bit better. There we go. Hopefully you can see the braid type structure there. Looks a little bit like a knit stitch working up the spine horizontally. So as it's on the shelf, if it's upright, you can see the bands going horizontally across. So that's a good option. It's a very traditional option. Again, for this one, I've used card and scrapbook paper to create covers, and this time I have the folded edge on the fore edge of the book, so the opening side of the book. I've used the card just to give the paper a little bit more sturdiness, so it's still a soft book, but just a little bit heavier weight than paper on its own. If you have some loose leaf papers that you want to bind, perhaps some photographs of a special occasion or some completed artwork, then stab stitch bindings may be the way to go. I like the look of the Japanese stab stitch bindings. This is the Noble stitch. And to be honest, I haven't seen a great many examples of stab stitch binding from the West. They seem to be predominantly an Asian style of binding, as far as I can tell so far. So the binding stitches wrap around the spine to create a decorative edge that works well for landscape books. Again, I've used card for the covers and printer paper for the interior. And there are various different existing established traditional patterns for these stitches, but you can also sort of freeform it a little bit and work out your own way of doing it. The pattern is echoed on the back as the front, and yeah, it looks kind of pretty. Nice decorative edge to the spine. So I say this is the Noble stitch. The base layer of Japanese stab stitch designs is the 4-hole. This is like one step on in levels of complicatedness, and they do get more and more intricate from there. So that's Japanese stab stitch bindings. So as you can see, there's a great deal of variation in bookbinding. We've really only scratched the surface in this video. It's quite the rabbit hole. I can easily see me integrating bookbinding and other crafts. Embroidered book covers, anyone? Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see any more detail on some of the styles of bookbinding that I've mentioned here today. And thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I look forward to seeing you in my next video. In the meantime, there's this video here that may be of interest to you, and I will see you soon. But until then, happy crafting and bye-bye for now.